The thing I love about teaching the most is coming in every day and getting to work with young people. They are just so creative and willing to give it a go. My name's Emily Davison. I'm currently a pre-service teacher doing my Masters of Teaching at Monash University. Before I enrolled in my Masters of Teaching at Monash, I lived in New York for 3 years where I went to the Atlantic Acting School. I spent a lot of time doing a lot of physical theatre while I was there, but also spent a bit of time working on some television shows.
Like the Red Sea. They'd make a path. Because I wasn't nothing.
I did my undergraduate in acting. I actually went to NIDA in Sydney for 3 years. I just realised that teaching was something that really brought me a lot of joy and a lot of challenges, but also just a lot of satisfaction. So the kind of impact that I'd love to have on my students is just making them the best human beings they can be. In acting, you have to think about different characters' perspectives that might be very different from your own. If students have to explore that, it will open up their ideas and making them more conscious and, I guess, open-minded citizens. The great thing about Monash is that they offer secondary and primary teaching as a combined master's program. Something that I'm personally really interested in is looking at how drama can bridge that transition between grade 6 and year 7 for students that can sometimes be, a difficult moment in their lives. At the moment, I'm doing a Drama Victoria Theatre Festival placement. It's been such an exciting experience because a lot of the students that will come into my workshop don't actually know each other, which creates a really interesting kind of electric atmosphere because they're really getting out of their comfort zone. I've just really loved having an authority over the workshops that we've been running, which means we can really, rise and fall on our own backs, which will give us a bit of an edge going out into the real world of teaching.
I would like to acknowledge the lands on which we all meet today and recognise that sovereignty was never ceded. I would like to specifically acknowledge that the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung people, communities of the Kulin Nation, are the ongoing custodians of the lands on which Monash University now stands. We pay our respects through our research, teaching and learning to the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung elders and their past, present and future communities. Hello and welcome to the Become a Teacher Master of Teaching session for Open Day at Monash 2020. My name is Rebecca and I'll be doing a brief presentation today for you, outlining some of the essential things that you need to know about becoming a teacher by studying a Master of Teaching, and then we'll move on to a question and answer panel with one of our students and also graduates of our courses. So to begin, why study education at Monash? Well, there are some pretty great reasons. In general, education remains in the top 3 employment growth areas in Australia. It's a highly skilled and regulated profession with a very low chance of automation. So you know that with education, you're moving into a profession that has strong growth and strong prospects for the future. And looking at Monash specifically, we have 93.2% of Monash education graduates at a postgraduate level employed within 4 months of graduating from their master's program. So again, some great prospects there. One of the reasons for that is that Monash is ranked number 1 in Australia and top 15 in the world for education. So, some fast facts about the Master of Teaching. We deliver the Master of Teaching from the Clayton campus and the Peninsula campus at Monash. Only one of the specializations is delivered at Peninsula, and I'll show you a slide in a moment that shows the specializations and the different campuses they're offered at. The duration of the course is 2 years full-time or 4 years part-time, which is also an option. Or we do have a 1.5-year full-time accelerated program for the secondary education specialisation. The intake is once a year, so you need to apply for semester 1, and that will start usually in the start of March each year. And you can see tuition fees listed there. We do offer Commonwealth supported places for domestic students for this course, which is great news. Here you can see the specialisations available, so you can see that we offer early childhood education, primary education and secondary education, or you can actually combine two of those different areas. And as I mentioned, the Peninsula campus has one specialisation delivered there, so primary education is at the Peninsula campus. Every other specialisation is offered at the Clayton campus. And on this slide, I've just popped up there the different age groups of the pupils that you would be teaching if you looked at any of these specialisations. This is really helpful if you're not quite sure which specialisation you want to go for yet. So have a think about the age group of children that you would like to teach, and that will help you choose a specialisation, hopefully. Now, professional experience is a huge part of any teaching degree. At Monash with a Master of Teaching, you'll have a minimum of 60 days professional experience as part of your degree. Because the degree runs for 4 semesters, that means you'll have 4 different placements, each of 15 days. And in those placements, most of them will be locally around Melbourne and Melbourne suburbs, but you do actually have the option to apply for and go to a rural or regional placement. Or you can head overseas. We actually have 8 different countries that we offer overseas placements at. We call it international professional experience, obviously when travel is permitted again. Now, entry requirements. There are some entry requirements that are standard across all of the different specialisations. So the academic entry requirement that you need to meet is the equivalent of an Australian undergraduate or bachelor degree with at least a 60% average. This requirement may be higher. It just depends on who else is applying for the Master of Teaching, how many places we have, and all those sorts of things. So your applications may be ranked, which means that the requirement may be higher than 60%. But if you do have a minimum 60% average in your undergraduate degree, we strongly encourage you to apply. Now, there is also an English language requirement that you're required to meet. If you are an Australian student that has studied all of your studies in Australia in English, then you'll likely already have met that requirement. But if you're an international student, or maybe you did some of your studies in a different country, then you may be required to meet the requirement by completing an English language test. So the IELTS is a nice benchmark for these kinds of tests, and you can see there the score that you would need to meet. We do have other test options available on our website. Another major requirement for any teaching degree at Monash is the CASPER requirement. CASPER is an online test that's undertaken as a situational judgment test. What that means is that it's not based on academic achievement or knowledge. It's actually looking at professional and personal traits within you. So the way that CASPER works is that you will log on online and you'll actually watch a range of videos that outlay different situations, and you'll then be required to respond to those situations in short answers, explaining why you might do something in that situation, what you would do and why you would do it. And from that, we draw out the different personal qualities that hopefully mean that you're right for the teaching profession. So that's one extra requirement you need to meet, and you can find out more information about that on our website. There are some specific additional requirements for some different specialisations, the ones that include primary education or secondary education. So if you're studying early childhood and primary education as your specialisation, you need to have at least 1 year of full-time equivalent study relevant to one or more learning areas of the primary school curriculum. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering what on earth that means. Basically what that means is that we want to be able to see some sort of connection between what you've studied in your undergraduate degree and one area or more areas that are delivered in primary schools. So for example, that could be as simple as you studied a Bachelor of Arts in your undergraduate degree and English was your major. We know that obviously English and literacy is a major area of study in primary school, so that's an easy one to connect. There might be some that aren't quite as obvious though. For example, maybe you've done a Bachelor of Engineering and you're thinking, how on earth does that relate to the primary school curriculum? Well, I can tell you that it definitely does, because you would have studied a lot of maths in your engineering degree and a lot of science as well, which of course are delivered at a primary school level. So I just want to say, don't be too scared by this requirement, because it's pretty rare that we would find a degree that we wouldn't be able to find relevant studies of 1 year in one or more areas of the primary school curriculum. Even if you think it's not really relevant, it possibly and very likely is. So if you're looking at primary education, it's the same requirement. You need to have that 1 year of full-time equivalent study that's relevant to one or more learning areas of the primary school curriculum. It's a bit different for primary and secondary. You still have that requirement for primary school curriculum areas, but you also need to have a major study in one secondary teaching area. The reason for this is because for primary education, you're actually studying to become a generalist primary school teacher. So you're going to be learning across all different areas of the curriculum. But for secondary education, you're actually going to be a specialist. So for your secondary education, you're choosing 1 or 2 different areas, depending on which specialisation you do in the Master of Teaching, that you're going to focus on, that you're then going to be able to teach in high schools. So for primary and secondary education, you need to have a major, so that's a minimum of 6 subjects across multiple levels of study in your undergraduate degree for 1 secondary teaching areas. And on the next slide, I'll share with you the secondary teaching areas that Monash offers. For secondary education, you still need to have that major study in 1 secondary teaching area. You no longer need that primary relevance, because we're getting primary education out of the equation for this one. But you need a major study in 1 secondary teaching area and at least a minor study, so 4 standard university subjects, in a second teaching area. Or you might have a major study in 1 double teaching area, and I'll show you those on this next slide. So you can see here the list of different specialisations or specialist teaching areas that we offer under secondary education at Monash. Most of these are single specialist teaching areas, but you can see there that a language, music or visual arts can be considered as a double area. So if you're choosing secondary education as your specialisation for the Master of Teaching, if you have a language, music or visual arts as your major study area in your bachelor degree, then we can count that twice as a double area, and you don't have to have a minor in another area on this list. Okay, so how do you apply? It's pretty straightforward. For the Master of Teaching, you can apply direct to Monash, whether you're an international student or a domestic student. If you're an international student, you can also apply through a Monash accredited agent, and applications are open now all the way through until 22nd of January 2021. If you're a domestic student, so an Australian or New Zealand citizen or an Australian permanent resident, then we actually have 3 rounds of applications. So round 1 is open now and closes on the 24th of September, and then we have 2 more rounds where you can be considered to study the Master of Teaching. So if you're ready to apply now, we encourage you to apply for this first round so that you can learn only a couple of weeks after the application closing date for round 1 whether you're going to be offered a place in the Master of Teaching at Monash. I've mentioned CASPA on this slide here as well, because I just want to emphasise that CASPA is a requirement, but you don't have to meet it before you submit your application. So what you can do is you can apply for your course first, whether that's directly through Monash, or if you're an international student, direct to Monash or through an agent. And then you can actually use your Monash student ID number that's generated when you apply for the course to register for your CASPA sitting. And you can go to the takecaspa.com website for that. I also want to mention with CASPA, that takecaspa.com website has a huge range of resources for you as well, including practice tests and questions, and all sorts of technical questions about setting up and system requirements and those sorts of things, so that you can be fully prepared before you sit the CASPA test. So that is all we have today in our presentation. I would love to start talking to our panelists now. Today we have with us Sarah, who has actually just graduated from our Master of Teaching program at Monash. She studied secondary education. And we also have Simon, who graduated about 4 years ago, I think, from the Master of Teaching, also in secondary education. But both of them should be able to answer questions, regardless of the specialisation, about the student experience. And also Simon will have some great insights as to what life is like as a teacher once you graduate. Welcome to both of you, and thanks so much for joining us.
No problem, Beck.
Happy to be here.
Thanks. And we also have Chantel and Grace online, who are moderating in the Q&A section, and they'll also be able to relay questions to us. So if you do have a question, please type it into the Q&A section on your window now, if you haven't already. Do we have some questions in there already, Chantel or Grace?
Yeah, so the first question I'd like to start with tonight is, why did you specifically choose the Master of Teaching at Monash?
That's a really good question to start with. Maybe we should start with Sarah, if that's okay.
So in terms of masters, it was for me, it was because it was a shorter degree that I could do than going back and doing a bachelor's. And like Rebecca said, most of your bachelor's you'll be eligible to do the Master of Teaching, so it was just the easiest way for me to get that qualification. In terms of Monash, I applied to a couple different institutions, but I have to say that I just had the best experience with Monash in terms of the support that's provided and the advice and information. I had a couple questions about my specializations. I did secondary teaching, and I came into the campus and there was what's called a student engagement officer, and they were able to answer all of my questions straight away. They helped me get in touch with my student success advisor. So every student in the education faculty has their own success advisor who they can email at any time with questions about their course. And so, yeah, any questions that student engagement officer couldn't answer, she then put me in touch with the success advisor. And so, yeah, it was just a really great experience just in the application process and that early part of, I guess, getting into the course. I really knew that I was going to be supported at Monash.
That's fantastic. Simon, I know this might be casting your mind back a little bit, but what sort of prompted you to study a Master of Teaching with Monash?
Hi, everyone. Sorry my voice is a bit croaky. I've just come from a whole day of parent-teacher conferences, so but I'm happy to be here, actually. Why Monash? I think, well, I live really close to Monash. I can literally see Monash from where I live. So that helped. Also the IPE. I know I stressed, I don't know if there were people who were on the other panel, other session a few weeks ago, but I wanted to travel overseas and teach a little bit, obviously just in 3-week blocks. So that was appealing. I like the fact that I did it over 2 years. So I had a lot of spare time over the week to, I guess, not be a CRT or do relief teaching, but I had a lot of part-time gigs that I guess allowed me to boost my CV, and having only 10, 12 hours a week of contact hours allowed that for me. The flexibility was really appealing. Yeah, pretty much those two reasons were really high on the agenda when I selected Monash, and but the IPE was really, really appealing. I would have, if I live 20 kilometers away, I probably would have still gone to Monash and did it for the IPE. So.
And that's just in case anyone's forgotten that acronym, that's International Professional Experience. What else do we have there in the Q&A?
We've got a lot of questions in the Q&A,
Great.
Beck. They're coming in very fast now. So Janelle would like to know, are the placement days spread out in the semester, i.e. 1 day a week, or are the days in a block during the semester? So, for example, 3 weeks at a time.
I believe it's in a block, but I might throw to Sarah to answer this one.
Yeah, so in the Masters of Teaching, you're pretty much always going to have 3-week blocks. They're usually in the middle of semester, except your final semester, it'll be near the start, and that's because you have an assignment based on the placement experience. But yeah, it's in 3-week blocks.
And you're not expected to also be attending classes on campus during that placement, right? Great. What else do we have there, Grace?
So the next question is from a different Rebecca, who'd like to know, if you're a domestic student, is it highly likely that you will get a Commonwealth supported place, or are there only a limited number and many students pay the full fees?
The short answer is yes, it is highly likely that you'll receive a Commonwealth supported place. It's pretty rare that we would have a domestic student be offered a full fee place. Usually our places for the course are determined by Commonwealth supported place numbers and also number of placements available in particular specializations and specialist teaching areas. So it's not a common thing for us to need to offer full fee places to domestic students. So I would just mention though, when you are applying, hopefully when you're applying, in your preferences, to make sure that you're selecting Commonwealth supported place as your top preference, just to make sure that that is what you're offered, because if you don't select CSP or Commonwealth supported place, then your offer would reflect a full fee place. So just make sure you choose that when you're putting your application in.
Wonderful.
What else can we help with?
The next question I've got is, for both of our panelists, how did you find the course load and study time compared to your bachelor's?
That's a really good question. How do things compare, Sarah, to bachelor versus masters?
Oh, I have to throw my mind back a while. So my bachelor, just a little bit about me, I did a double degree, which still has a normal workload, but it just meant I had a more, I guess, varied academic experience. So it'll depend on what your undergraduate is. I had a lot more small assignments throughout my undergraduate each semester. So usually like my semester grade or that it would be made up of 5 or 6 smaller assessments and the exam, whereas in teaching there are no exams. It's you have 2 assignments per unit each semester. So I found it's probably a lot easier to space out your time. You can read the requirements in advance, and really plan out when you want to when you want to get those assignments done. So there's a smaller or like fewer assessment components, but they definitely require a higher standard of I guess time, but also like academic writing, and the amount of research that you'll have to do is going to take more time than what a bachelor's assignment would.
Thanks, Sarah. A few of us have got croaky voices this evening. Hopefully you can all have a rest after this is over. Simon, I won't make you answer this one because I know you did additional postgraduate studies after you finished your bachelor, so I think that might be casting too far back. And I think Sarah's covered that one pretty well. Grace, what else do we have there?
So the next question I've got from Helen, who would like to know, is there a time limit for when you completed your bachelor's degree before going into the master's?
Thanks, Helen. That's a nice, easy one. No, there isn't. It doesn't matter when you completed your bachelor degree, and you can come and study a Master of Teaching at any time. There's no rules around that. And indeed, I should mention, and I think Simon can attest to this, that there are a lot of people that have either taken a break from study in between doing their bachelor degree and their Master of Teaching, or like Simon, have studied other postgraduate studies after doing their bachelor degree before coming to do a Master of Teaching. So if that's your case, if it's been, 10, even 20 years since you finished your bachelor degree, you're not alone. There are definitely a wide range of students across the Master of Teaching in a whole bunch of different situations.
So the next question I've got, we've had a few questions from people about where you can teach after doing a Masters of Teaching. So can you teach overseas after getting a Masters of Teaching? Can you teach anywhere in Australia? Or are there other requirements you need to satisfy as well?
Yep, so you can teach, or start with Australia. So when you register as a teacher after completing your Master of Teaching, you'd be usually registering with the Victorian Institute of Teaching in Victoria. However, you can register in other states, and the Master of Teaching is recognised across all states in Australia. There may sometimes be an additional registration process that you need to go through. Some states have different requirements, but basically you are able to teach across Australia. In terms of overseas, yes, definitely you can teach overseas. We actually have a lot of graduates that go and teach in other, particularly Commonwealth countries. So England is a really popular place for people to go and teach after they study. Also Canada and a few other places. But we even have people go and teach in China, different countries around Asia. But the thing with different countries is you do always need to check what their registration requirements are, because there's definitely a lot of possibilities out there, but we can never guarantee that you'll be able to register as a teacher in a different country without doing some sort of additional requirement. But yeah, there's definitely a world of opportunity out there. That's one of the great things about education as a profession, is that there is so much opportunity out there across Australia and around the world as well.
Great. So the next question I have is, what was or is your favorite aspect of the course?
Sarah, do you want to go for this one first?
Yeah, sure. Placement, 100%. Yeah, I mean, the academic side of it is, it's really interesting. It makes you think. It really opens your eyes. It stretches your mind and your brain. But going on placement and putting it into action, meeting all the students, meeting future colleagues and everything. It's really rewarding. It really affirms what you're doing. It's a lot of fun. You get to do a lot of crazy stuff. Definitely placement.
Fantastic. And now you've had some time to think about it, Simon. How about you? What was your favourite part about studying the course?
I think placement is the best part. Like, I did a bit of the work with the ambassadors as well, and that was fun because you get to meet, I guess, other students who don't really talk to as much. And like some of my best mates now are actually, who could be listening right now, I'm not sure. They were doing the bachelor course, so they're a bit younger, but they came in with a lot of zest, a lot of energy, so that was fun. But I think also the international placements were really memorable. Like, I won't forget that for a while. And also just holistically teaching overseas, no matter how short period of time it was, you realize, and I think I spoke about this a few weeks ago as well, you do realize how lucky we are as a country with our educational standards, like the facilities we have, like even just the whole day I spoke on Teams to 40 parents. It might not be as easy doing it overseas, but that's quite memorable. So it puts, I guess, Australia on the map a little bit. I don't know, just the kids. I don't have any kids of my own, so I tell my kids, "You're my kids." Like, I mean, my school children. So yeah, all the times you spend with them, it's never a dull day, no matter if I'm teaching at home or at school.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, the kids always make it worthwhile, I'm sure. Grace, do we have something else there that people would like to know?
Yeah, so the next question I have is, have you had the opportunity to do any sort of interesting activities outside of your normal classroom and admin duties?
Oh, this one sounds like it's for Simon, and I'm pretty sure that you have done some exciting things since you graduated. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yes, driving the girls every morning, or not every morning, some mornings in term 3 to play badminton with them at 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. That's always fun. I actually couldn't do it this term because of obviously COVID, so I had to sleep in, but that's always interesting. Got a bus license for that, just to do that. Going to America with my girls, one student actually, just one, to NASA. That was fun. Oh, very fun. I won't forget that. It's going to be in the memory bank for a while. What else? I run the SSA at school, like the social staff committee. Shelford Staff Committee, actually, sorry. So we do a lot of just, I guess, making social events for the school. I run the footy tipping, which is always so fun. Richmond supporter, very proud. I guess the girls and I guess the classes are normally, I guess, you know, you're the crux of being a teacher, but it's nice to do other things as well. Going overseas with 30, 35 teenage girls to America was a bit of a wild experience, but that I won't forget that as well. So that was good. Yeah.
That's a pretty cool opportunity. Great, thank you for that. Grace, what else do we have there in the Q&A?
So the next question I have is, are there any disadvantages in regards to job opportunities of doing a master's over a bachelor's?
Well, I think I can speak in general terms and say I don't think that there are. I think it's just a different qualification, and I think that principals will value different students in different ways, and really it's about you as a graduate and a teacher. It's not necessarily as much about whether you did a master's or a bachelor's. Obviously, a bachelor degree, you're studying 4 years and you're studying education throughout that whole time. So I guess you get a little bit more exposure to education throughout that time. But if you are coming into a Master of Teaching, having done another degree beforehand, you've got all of this experience from your studies previously that you can draw upon and use in your Master of Teaching, and then use it again when you're out in the classroom. I guess this is probably another good one to just ask Simon. You know, how did you find the job application process and looking for a job after you graduated?
Yeah, sure. I only probably applied for, I reckon, under 10, maybe 5 to 10. It's been a while. It's like 5 years ago. I think I applied for, I think, up to 10. But really, like, from a personal point of view, I was quite, not lazy is not the right word, but I hadn't written my key selection criteria. So I applied for a lot of independent schools. And like my school was the only one that really got back to me. And to be honest, that was the only interview I did. I've only ever done one teaching interview, and that was the one that I got the job at.
Nailed it.
Yeah, but I think you're right, Beck, in terms of, I don't think my principal looked at my CV in terms of because to be honest, I did too many years at uni, and I'm pretty sure they wouldn't look at that in detail. I think what the only questions they asked were really about what I did in my postgrad in terms of what work I did. And I think at the end of the day, after being at the school for 3-4 years now, it's about, I think, if you fit into the culture. They don't expect you to be a superstar at teaching, because you sort of grow into the job. So they looked at your culture, they see whether you can fit in. And culture is not a thing that I put a lot of homage to until recently, but I think you can say that if the girls have I can see my school culture from the students' point of view, and I think if the staff fits into it, regardless of how amazing your CV is, I think you will have a good shot. So I would say no. I don't think there's a difference. That's just my personal opinion.
Great, yeah, and I think I can also, in terms of statistics, I think in the slides there, I think I'm remembering correctly, it was about 93.2% of our graduates find a job within 4 months of graduating. So I think that sort of can tell you that there's not a huge sort of disadvantage to doing a Master of Teaching, and I guess coming late to the area of teaching and education as your area of interest. In saying that, I think if you're still in year 12, still in high school, and you're thinking about studying education, I would still seriously consider looking at the Bachelor of Education Honours or one of the double degrees with that as your go-to, rather than doing another degree first and then studying a Master of Teaching, because obviously, I guess really for me, if you know you're interested in teaching and education, why wait? If you study a bachelor degree, you'll straight away be able to start doing education subjects, and you'll be able to do a placement in your first year. So if you are in that situation where you're in year 12 or in high school and deciding what to do, I would highly recommend studying the Bachelor of Education Honours or a double degree with it as your first choice. But that doesn't mean that a Master of Teaching is valued any less. It's just a different choice, and if you're interested in teaching, why not get straight into it? What else do we have in there, Grace?
So the next question I have is from Jasmine. He'd like to know, am I allowed to apply for the Master of Teaching if I already have a master's degree?
You absolutely are. And Simon, you have 2 master's degrees, don't you? Did you study extra postgrad before doing Master of Teaching?
Yeah, I did a doctorate in science.
That's right.
Yeah. So I went sort of a bit of a weird journey, but I landed where I wanted to land eventually. Takes a while.
So absolutely you can apply for a Master of Teaching even if you already have a master's degree in another area. That's no problem.
So I've also had quite a number of questions from people asking about whether there are classes on campus, obviously once that's safe again, but asking about the sort of timetabling structure of doing a Master's of Teaching.
Sure. So yes, obviously right now we don't have classes on campus due to restrictions, particularly in Melbourne. We're under some stricter restrictions. But once things go back to hopefully normal, next year we're looking forward to welcoming students back onto campus. So Sarah, I might throw to you to talk about your timetable and sort of how that's worked for you, how many days a week you're finding yourself on campus, those sorts of things.
Yeah, so like Simon mentioned, it's a maximum of 12 contact hours a week, so 4 units with a max of 3 hours. Before semester starts, you'll do something called Allocate Plus, where you put in your preferences. So each unit will have on this on Allocate Plus, they'll have each of the different classes that they'll be running. So they might have a lecture and a tutorial, and it'll say what different classes they're offering. So for a tutorial, there might be 5 different time slots across the week, and you'll put in your preferences for which ones suit your timetable best. And then you'll try to coordinate that across 4 different units so that you don't have to come into uni as much. In general, I think for myself and my friends that I've made, the usual number of days is probably 3 days a week. I definitely 2 days and 4 days is not unusual. I haven't met anyone who got a 1-day timetable or a 5-day timetable. It's usually about 3. And it's definitely manageable in terms of part-time work. I think Simon said he did bits of pieces of work on the side as well. Personally, I didn't, but I definitely know people who did do part-time work. I know parents as well. Again, like Rebecca said, you get people from all different stages of life. There are definitely parents who manage their kids and everything, as well as their uni studies.
Fantastic. What else do we have there to answer about the Master of Teaching?
So what does an actual placement day look like? What do you find yourself doing?
Oh, Sarah, do you want to jump on that one?
Yeah, so you'll be doing 4 placements, 1 per semester, and what you do will evolve across the 4. So in your first one, you'll mostly be observing, taking notes. So you get a mentor teacher, I should say. So on each placement, you'll get a mentor teacher, and you'll basically follow them for all of their classes. You can also ask to be put in contact with other teachers in the school if you'd like to observe other areas. So you'll start out mostly just observing. Maybe you'll get to run an activity. If you're at a school with other pre-service teachers, so for example, my first 2 placements I did with 12 other students from Monash, and so we did what's called team teaching, where we would like take a class together as maybe a group of 3, and then that'll progress across the 4. So by the end, you'll sit down with your mentor at the start of your placement. They'll tell you what classes they take, and you'll see what you're comfortable taking, and then you run from there. You hit the ground running and you start planning. So again, even in your last placement, you'll spend the first 2 days observing, just to give you time to plan and then you'll have, usually in your last placement, you'll want to have a full teaching load, more or less. So you'll plan your lessons, you'll implement them, and then after each lesson, you'll get feedback from your mentor to help you improve.
Great, thank you. And I might just very quickly flip that for Simon and just ask you, how do you think that placements compared to teaching when you finished up and actually started going out into your professional life as a teacher?
That's a really good question, actually. I don't know. I think I still get nervous walking into a classroom. I do. Obviously, it's not as it's like more just jittery nerves because you don't know what to expect. But like I'm lucky to teach at a school where like the students are they're quite easy to manage. Like it's, after all, let's be honest, it's independent girls. They're not tough to manage. But when I was teaching, doing my placement, all I can remember was how mentally and physically draining it was. Like I would be, and I live pretty far, so and I didn't have a car then as well. So I was taking public transport, and I would just be exhausted. And I wasn't even the teacher really. I was the second in command. In terms of, was it preparing for real teaching? Was that what you?
Yeah.
I would say it helps, but really, like it helps because I guess just knowing how to, even small things like how to speak to 25 students, because it's not easy. Like you don't really do that in everyday life. Like you speak to groups of people every single day. Knowing just how to think on your feet, because sometimes, because I teach bio and there'll be some questions from students who aren't, I guess, as science orientated. They'll ask me something which you sort of know because it's just your area, but then you got to twist it into something which they get and they're accessible to. So doing that, not just with placement, but your first few years of teaching, it does make it easier, because I'm in my 4th year now and it's not as difficult anymore, like touch wood. I guess also just being on your feet for 6 hours a day, it's quite draining, and just talking, actually, this is actually the biggest thing. Even just talking for 6 hours, 5 hours, you've got to evolve. Your vocal cords have to evolve as well. So just the small sort of physical things that you're not used to, you get trained in quite intensely. So I don't know. The list goes on. I can't think of all of them at the moment, but obviously it helps.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Yeah, thank you for that. Really, so you can never really completely be prepared for your career through placements, but you can definitely, there are things that you can draw on, and all of those things about voice and being on your feet was something that I would never have thought of. So that's really great insights. Thanks, Simon. Grace, what else do we have there?
Becca, Chantal here.
Hello.
We've got time for one last question for each Simon and Sarah. So the first one is for Simon to answer a question from Kylie from online about what are the challenges working as a teacher, such as like what's the workload like, what about the marking and the lesson planning, so that sort of thing she's interested in. But on the other side as well for Sarah, what are some of the highlights that attracts you to teaching? What makes you want to become a teacher?
Okay, so we might go with Simon first, since that was the first off the rank. So what are the challenges? We know that there are definitely lots of challenges being a teacher.
It's challenge, or I mean, it's recency bias with this term. I guess since March, the most challenging thing has been obviously teaching on the computer. Not that a Master's of Teaching can prepare you for that. Like it's just something we've all been thrown. Well, I guess hopefully, if we're thinking from your point of view, you'll be hopefully getting back to day-to-day teaching next year in school. So I think it's really different. Like in my first year, I was thrown a VC Year 12 class as my first as a first year student, which, or I told the principal, yes, I'll do it. But you're never really prepared for a year 12 class. So I think lesson planning, I'm not a person, but like, I mean, my school doesn't require me to submit lesson plans to them. It's just you plan it yourself with some friends, some colleagues. So planning, I normally plan in like maybe 2-week blocks. Like I would know like this week in my year 9 science class, I'll teach this, this, and this, and this. I can't do things in 10-minute blocks. I just can't, because it's also, teaching is such a fluid job. Like you've got to maybe just think of something to do for half an hour because the girls are tired on the computer. They can't, it's a Friday afternoon. I'm not going to teach the way I walked into teaching the class. No, I'm not getting that right. I'm not going to teach what I wanted to teach before I walked into class. So I normally just, I'm more of an ideas. I'll teach this idea and I'll just teach however I want to teach it, gauging from the girls. In my second year, things got easier because you're not just trying to learn the school. Because first year, you learn the school, how they run, the girls, the students. I think that normally for me, I didn't feel like I was a competent teacher until maybe my third, and definitely this year. I think I'm much better this year, but like writing reports is tough. I don't like I'm not a writer. Like writing reports is hard. Yeah, I guess also parent expectations, because I go to a school where the parents do pay quite a bit. So managing them, getting them on side. But I think one tip is, I mean, for all the teachers out there, as long as you show the girl, I keep saying girls, as long as I show the kids that I care about them, I might not be the best teacher for certain topics because we all have strengths and weaknesses. If they know that you've got their back, the kids would support you, and the parents you get the parents on board as well, which is a big deal, I think. So learn just the way that you learn, how like plan the way you want. But if you show the girls that you care and the kids that you care, then you're in a winning position, I think. Anyway, that was a bit of a rant. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And I mean, honestly, I'm not a teacher, but I can remember way back when I was in school, and the teachers that I remembered and valued the most and still remember and value are the ones that really truly showed that they cared about me and that were passionate about the things that they were teaching. So that really resonates with me, even not as a teacher.
I think passion's a big thing, actually. And the girls know I love bio, and I think Sarah's a bio teacher. Like, if they know that you love your subject, they let a lot of things slide.
Good to know. So Sarah, you've had a little bit of thinking time. I think that the second question from Kylie was what drew you to teaching, and maybe what sustains you and your enjoyment of teaching as you've been studying.
Yeah, so with what drew me to teaching, I was working in a corporate job, so I do bio and accounting, and I was an accountant. And look, accounting is fine, but it wasn't a passion. I was working really long hours for something that it didn't fulfill me. I think just on a daily kind of basis, it wasn't rewarding in the same way that teaching is. So yeah, I just started thinking about, what's a profession that I can do where I'm going to have a positive impact on the people around me and my community, and really see the dividends of that. And that's an accounting joke. And then in terms of what sustains me through the course, it's the students, absolutely, and having that relationship with them and knowing that, that you're making a difference in their day. And when, like Simon said, when they know that you have their back. And I mean, of course, as doing placement, it's not the same, but you can still in 3 weeks see the difference that you've made. And yeah, I mean, I'm just really excited to get to have that, to build on that, where you have a whole year to get to know them. And I mean, I'm really passionate about learning and about my content as well. I think the best feedback that I actually got out of all my placements was that one of my mentors said that my passion for the content, it was really coming across to the students. And so that really meant a lot to me that something that I really care about is being transmitted. I'm sorry for any background noise in my audio.
It's fine.
Yeah.
I'll just add to that as well, Beck, if just like 20 seconds.
Yeah.
When Sarah was saying like you do things and the kids value you, like one thing that sort of again, it's very it's you don't do the teaching for the rewards, I guess, because I mean then there's not the right reason of doing it. But like sometimes they'll just write you a card, which is really sweet. Like they'll write me a card and go, and like I mean, because this year with COVID, a lot of the things at school was cancelled. So the girls at the school are really into like their opera and their the performing arts. Yeah, like I'm not a performing arts person, but a lot of the girls are. And just even the small thing like having a chat to them about, Jazzy, like I'm really sorry that you can't, audition for the role, because you can see that they're upset. And then like 5 weeks later, they'll come around to you and they'll say, Mr. Chow, like one of the sweetest things you did this year was just asking me how I was going and just showing concern. And maybe it's, I don't know, it's just a teenage thing, but like small things like that, you won't forget those things, which is, like what Sarah was saying, it's one of the reasons you sort of do it. One of the nice things that sustains you, I think, that's what I'm trying to say.
I love that. Thank you for adding that, Simon. On that note, I think we need to finish up, unfortunately. It's been a great conversation, but that is all we have time for. I'd like to thank so much our panel, Sarah and Simon, for coming along and sharing your insights as a recent graduate and as a graduate established in your profession. And I'd also like to thank everyone who's been watching and asking questions. If we didn't get to your question or if you need more help, you can still chat with an education course advisor or a current student until 7 p.m, so you've got a little bit of time left. Click on the Chat With Us button on the top navigation bar, click Join a Chat Room and choose the Welcome to Education chat to start chatting with us. Thanks very much to everyone and have a great evening.